Japan's 6.8 earthquake just shocked scientists, and the 9.0 plus megaquake risk is rising. Because what happened off the coast of Japan follows the exact same terrifying pattern that preceded the 2011 Tohoku disaster that killed 18,000 people and triggered a global tsunami. Picture magnitude 6.8 and 6.4 earthquakes rupturing in the same location where the Great Tohoku earthquake began, after 17 days of complete seismic silence. This isn't normal aftershock activity. This is a foreshock sequence that mirrors the deadly buildup to Japan's worst natural disaster in modern history. But here is what has seismologists in complete panic. The earthquake struck within 1 hour of a massive X-class solar flare blasting directly at Earth. The same space weather conditions that have triggered every major earthquake in recent history suggest forces beyond our planet are somehow connected to when the Earth decides to unleash its most violent geological fury. Even more terrifying, there is a 5% chance these earthquakes are just the warm-up act for something much bigger. The stress patterns, the timing, the location, everything matches the 2011 sequence that built up to a magnitude 9.1 megaquake that moved Japan 8 feet and shifted Earth's axis. Are we watching the early warning signs of Japan's next mega disaster? Or has the countdown to a Pacific-wide catastrophe that could dwarf 2011 already begun? Seismologists turned immediately to the raw seismic fingerprints left by the November 9th earthquake. Within seconds of the first broadband pulses, the network of deep ocean and land seismometers recorded a sharp onset, an unmistakable signature of a shallow megathrust rupture. The quake's focus lay just 10 kilometers beneath the seafloor, locked into the same subduction interface that has haunted Japan's disaster memory for over a decade. Sensors along the Japan Trench captured a cluster of nearly simultaneous shocks, each one mapped to a tight zone east of Iwate Prefecture. In the hours that followed, analysts scrutinized the event's waveform shapes. The initial P waves arrived with a crisp, high-frequency edge, followed by dense S-wave energy that rolled through the crust. These patterns matched what is expected for a classic interface event, but the clustering of epicenters, main shock, and aftershocks packed within a few dozen kilometers stood out. Normally, aftershocks scatter more widely. Here, the seismicity was tightly bundled, suggesting the fault had not fully relaxed. One analyst at the National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Resilience summed up the concern. When you see a cluster like this, right on a trench segment known for its locked potential, you have to wonder if the fault is communicating stress along its length. The sequence's anatomy revealed more than just location. The main shock and its largest aftershock, a magnitude 6.4, ruptured almost side by side, both at shallow depths, both in the same locked corridor that failed catastrophically in 2011. The brief silence before the first rupture, followed by a rapid-fire cascade of moderate events, drew attention to the possibility of stress transfer between patches. Seismologists mapped the hypocenters in 3 dimensions, noting how they stacked along the interface. The clustering was not random. It mirrored the geometry of the megathrust, with most activity hugging the boundary where the Pacific Plate dives beneath northern Honshu. The data suggested that energy was being shuffled, not dissipated, along a fault segment already flagged for future risk. The stacked pattern was unnerving. In the background, the broadband records told another story. The absence of deep, slow slip signals and the dominance of abrupt, high-frequency shaking pointed to a brittle rupture, evidence that the interface remains tightly coupled and capable of sudden failure. As the aftershock catalog grew, experts watched for any sign of migration or escalation, knowing that the anatomy of these first hours could hint at what the fault might do next. A magnitude 6.8 earthquake might sound abstract until the numbers are converted into something tangible. The energy released by this single rupture was equivalent to the detonation of nearly 200,000 tons of TNT, enough to flatten a city block if focused at the surface. Yet, for the scientists watching Japan's seismic networks, the real shock came not from the headline magnitude, but from the way the energy was distributed and the odds it implied. GPS stations scattered along the Tohoku coastline recorded sudden offsets, some measuring up to a centimeter within minutes of the main shock. These shifts, though invisible to the naked eye, signaled a rapid transfer of strain across the plate boundary. In earthquake science, a centimeter of motion at the surface can mean meters of slip at depth, an unsettling reminder of the power lurking beneath. The moment rate curves, which chart how quickly energy is unleashed during a rupture, revealed a sharp, double-peaked pattern. The main shock and its largest aftershock struck within less than an hour of each other, both in the same locked corridor. This dual rupture timing is rare for subduction zones, and it forced analysts to recalculate the odds of what might follow. In most seismic sequences, aftershocks scatter the stress and reduce the likelihood of another large event. Here, the moment release was concentrated, with both quakes drawing from the same reservoir of built-up energy. Statistical models used by hazard planners estimate that after a shallow offshore quake of this size, there is a small but real chance, perhaps around 5%, that an even larger rupture could occur in the following days or weeks. That number may seem low, but in a country where the cost of a false alarm is measured in billions of yen and the cost of a missed warning is measured in lives, it is enough to keep officials on edge. The energy scale of the magnitude 6.8 and magnitude 6.4 events, the tight clustering of their epicenters, and the measurable GPS offsets all point to a fault segment that remains highly stressed. The odds may favor a quiet period, but the possibility of escalation cannot be dismissed. For seismologists, the question is not just what happened, but what these numbers are quietly warning about the future. Hundreds of physical instruments stand guard along the Japanese coast and deep beneath the Pacific, forming a technological web that records every tremor, shift, and surge. At the heart of this network are real-time GPS stations, spaced just a few kilometers apart along Tohoku's rugged shoreline. Each unit measures ground movement down to the millimeter, transmitting updates every second to central servers in Tokyo. When the magnitude 6.8 earthquake struck, these GPS sensors registered sudden offsets, tiny but crucial signs of the crust flexing under stress. Beyond the shoreline, more than 150 seafloor observation pods stretch across 5,500 kilometers of cable in the Japan Trench. Each pod carries 3-component seismometers and high-resolution pressure gauges, built to detect both the violent jolt of a rupture and the subtle rise of a tsunami wave. These pods stream data continuously, their signals racing through fiber optic lines to land stations, where automated systems scan for the earliest hints of trouble. In the hours surrounding the main shock, the pods captured a rapid-fire sequence of ground motions, feeding analysts a second-by-second view of the fault's behavior. Overhead, Japanese satellites pass every 12 hours, using radar to map changes in the Earth's surface from space. These INSAR snapshots reveal where the crust has lifted, dropped, or twisted, sometimes by mere centimeters after a major event. Combined with GPS and seafloor data, these satellite images help scientists build a three-dimensional picture of how much strain remains locked in the fault. Together, this hardware grid forms the backbone of Japan's earthquake surveillance, converting raw ground truth into the numbers and signals that drive every warning, forecast, and risk assessment. Data from hundreds of seafloor observatories, land seismometers, GPS stations, and satellites pours into Japan's central servers every second. Each node in this network, whether anchored to the trench floor or buried beneath city streets, feeds raw waveforms, ground shifts, and pressure changes into a layered fusion pipeline. Algorithms sort through this torrent, matching the earliest P waves from the deep ocean cables with spikes in ground motion from the onshore strong motion arrays. Within seconds, the system triangulates the rupture's origin, depth, and magnitude, cross-checking with GPS offsets and tide gauges for signs of tsunami generation. But the real power comes from blending these streams. Acoustic mapping from the SNet cable grid, stretching over 5,500 kilometers, pinpoints the rupture's footprint with extraordinary precision. Machine learning models are still experimental, but growing in influence, and they scan aftershock catalogs in real time, ranking which clusters are most likely to escalate. These AI tools sift through patterns invisible to the human eye, flagging sequences that echo past foreshock cascades. At the same time, research dashboards monitor the ionosphere's total electron content, watching for anomalies that might hint at deeper geophysical unrest, even as most experts treat these signals with caution. Each feed has its limits. The seafloor sensors excel at rapid detection, but can miss the nuances of slow slip events. AI models can rank aftershock risk, but their forecasts are still checked by human seismologists before any public advisory. Ionospheric flags remain too noisy for operational use and are archived for study rather than action. In the end, Japan's fusion system is a partnership: automation for speed, expert judgment for credibility. One scientist says, "We cannot predict the future, but we can see more of the present than ever before." The first warning arrived as a sharp, electronic wail, Japan's earthquake early alert system blasting from phones, radios, and public speakers. Within 90 seconds, a pulse of sirens swept through Iwate's coastal towns, cutting through the late afternoon routine. Trains brake to a stop on elevated tracks, their operators following protocols drilled into memory since 2011. On the Tohoku Shinkansen line, rail traffic halted automatically, sensors tripping circuits before the shaking reached the embankments. At Sendai Airport, ground crews hustled to clear the runways, scanning for cracks or buckled pavement as air traffic controllers paused all inbound flights. In the city center, digital billboards switched to emergency mode, flashing evacuation instructions in bold red text. The mayor of Miyako, standing in his office, listened as the J-alert system relayed the tsunami advisory. He gave a single nod, then relayed the order to activate evacuation plans. No hesitation, no debate. School teachers led lines of children toward higher ground, backpacks swinging, while elderly residents moved with practiced determination. Fishermen abandoned their boats, some recalling the seconds lost in 2011 when hesitation cost lives. Buses rolled out along pre-planned routes, each stop timed to the minute. Across the region, compliance was almost automatic. Years of drills had etched the sequence into daily life. Siren, gather, move uphill, wait for the all clear. Even as the official forecast called for only a modest wave, the choreography of evacuation unfolded with the urgency of memory. For many, the sound of the siren was more than a warning. It was a summons, a reminder that in this part of Japan, readiness is not a choice, but a reflex. In coastal Iwate, readiness is woven into daily life, shaped by memories that never quite fade. Every household keeps a go bag by the door, a sturdy pack weighing about 8 kilograms, packed with water, dried rice, batteries, a flashlight, and a radio. For many, it is as essential as an umbrella in spring. Monthly drills are a ritual. Sirens sound, and within minutes, families grab their kits and make for higher ground. Schools set a 10-minute target to reach designated shelters, teachers timing the march with practiced urgency. Volunteer radio teams coordinate along the evacuation routes, relaying updates as they scan for stragglers or blocked paths. One resident, a grandmother who lost her childhood home in 2011, describes the routine as both burden and comfort. "You never want to use it," she says, patting her emergency bag, "but you need to know it's there. It's how we sleep at night." For children born after the tsunami, the drills are as normal as recess. For elders, each practice run is a silent reckoning with the past. Local shops stock ready-made kits, and radio batteries sell out whenever the earth shakes. The community's commitment is visible in the small things. Evacuation maps taped beside light switches, family meeting points set in every neighborhood, radios checked before bed. These habits do not erase the risk, but they tip the odds, turning panic into action and memory into a kind of shield. Inside Japan's Emergency Operations Center, the mood is tense. The earthquake numbers are on every screen, but the real debate is about what comes next. For the Emergency Operations Center coordinator, every decision is a calculation against risk and cost. Shutting down ports and factories, evacuating hundreds of thousands from the coast, each hour of disruption carries a price tag that can climb into the tens of billions of yen. During the 2025 Kamchatka tsunami scare, evacuations and halts in transport and industry racked up losses that economists estimate could reach over 100 billion yen in a single day. But the alternative, hesitation in the face of even a few % chance of disaster, is unthinkable. The probability models on the coordinator's desk show a number that refuses to be ignored. A 5% conditional chance that the recent earthquake sequence could precede something much larger. It is not a forecast, but in the world of disaster planning, even a single-digit chance of catastrophe is enough to force hard choices. The memory of 2011 overshadows every discussion. Some officials argue for caution, pointing to the cost of false alarms and the risk of public fatigue if evacuations become routine. Others insist that credibility means nothing if the warnings come too late. Every alert, every order to move people or shut down infrastructure is weighed against both the economic toll and the haunting possibility of another tragedy. In the end, the Emergency Operations Center's dilemma is not just about numbers. It is about trust. Between the scientists who run the models, the leaders who make the calls, and the communities who have to live with the consequences. The pressure is immediate and relentless, with no room for error. Engineers across Japan have spent years running disaster scenarios on the nation's most vulnerable coastlines. The latest simulations show how a chain reaction could cripple critical infrastructure, with a major offshore rupture, power knocked out across prefectures, and communications falling silent just as evacuation orders go out. One scenario, modeled after the 2011 blackout, predicts a cascading outage that would leave millions without light or heat for days. In response, planners have pushed for a new 2-meter seawall along some of the most exposed stretches of the Tohoku coast, a barrier designed to slow, if not stop, a repeat of the 2011 tsunami's devastation. But progress is uneven. Compliance audits reveal that 37% of older coastal defenses now fall short of updated standards, eroded by time, budget cuts, or the sheer scale of what is required. The mantra in Japan's disaster offices is simple. Prepare for the worst, even if you hope for the best. Every yen spent on higher seawalls, backup generators, and reinforced shelters is weighed against the cost of another unthinkable loss. The goal is not to guarantee safety, but to stack the odds in favor of survival, 1 meter of concrete, 1 evacuation drill, 1 resilient community at a time. Right now, Japan's most advanced seismic networks are watching the ocean floor in real time, but even the best technology cannot predict when the next rupture will come. With over 37 million people living in Tokyo's shadow, the margin for error is vanishingly thin. The Earth's silence isn't safety, it's suspense. When the ground waits, so does the world. Stay vigilant and let me know your thoughts below. San Francisco Bay Area. Fault lines are rupturing, and a magnitude 6.0 plus megaquake has started with an earthquake swarm that's been shaking the region continuously for 2 weeks, following the exact same pattern that preceded the catastrophic 1906 earthquake that leveled the entire city. Picture 7 million people living above a network of deadly fault lines that have been quietly building pressure for over a century, suddenly waking up to a magnitude 3.8 earthquake right under residential areas in San Ramon. But this isn't just one quake, it's hundreds of tremors cutting through the mountains in a clear line, connecting faults that scientists thought were separate. Here's what has seismologists in full panic mode. The earthquake swarm is happening at the northernmost part of the Calaveras Fault, the same system that connects to the West Napa Fault that ruptured in 2014. GPS stations show the ground is moving. Stress is transferring between fault segments, and the pattern matches every major Bay Area disaster in recorded history. But the most terrifying discovery is that this swarm is occurring after the West Napa Fault released massive energy in 2014, meaning all that stress is now loading onto fault segments that have not ruptured in over 100 years. The math is brutal. When these faults finally snap, the energy release could be catastrophic. Is this earthquake swarm just normal Bay Area activity? Or are we watching the opening act of a magnitude 6+ megaquake that could devastate the most populated region on the West Coast? 7 million people live in the Bay Area, but few realize how the ODDS stack up beneath their feet. Scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey have spent decades mapping every fault, every slip, and every tremor, searching for patterns in the chaos. Their models reveal a stark number. There is a greater than 66% chance, a 72% probability, of at least one magnitude 6.7 or larger earthquake striking the Bay Area before 2043. That is not a distant, abstract possibility. It is the mathematical reality for anyone living between the Golden Gate and the Diablo Range. The Hayward Fault, running straight through cities like Oakland, Berkeley, and Fremont, is ranked among the most dangerous urban faults in the United States. The Calaveras, San Andreas, Rogers Creek, and Concord and Green Valley faults each carry their own risk, but the Hayward and Rogers Creek system stands out. It sits directly beneath some of the densest neighborhoods and critical infrastructure on the West Coast. U.S. Geological Survey hazard maps color these corridors in deep red, marking them as zones of highest concern. When scientists talk about the big one, they are not conjuring a Hollywood disaster. They are reading from probability charts grounded in decades of paleoseismic trenching, GPS monitoring, and aftershock statistics. The Hayward Fault alone is given a 33% chance of producing a major quake in the next 30 years. The Calaveras sits at 26%. Even the San Andreas, famous for 1906, holds a 22% slice of the risk. Combined, these numbers show that a destructive earthquake in the Bay Area is not just possible, it is expected. Sarah Minson, a U.S. Geological Survey geophysicist, puts it plainly. This region keeps having earthquake swarms due to a lot of fluid-filled cracks, thanks to very complex fault geometry, unlike, say, the San Andreas Fault, which is this nice, clean edge. It is a reminder that the Bay Area's hazard is not just about a single fault snapping, but a tangled system where stress and energy can shuffle from one segment to the next. These official odds are not predictions for a specific day, but they do translate to everyday risk. Over a typical Bay Area lifetime, the chance of experiencing a life-altering quake is far higher than most people expect. For city planners, hospital architects, and millions of families, these percentages are not just lines on a chart. They are the basis for building codes, insurance rates, and emergency drills. The numbers point to a simple truth. In the Bay Area, seismic risk is not a question of if, but when. That probability hangs over every commute, every school, every home perched on the hills or tucked into the valleys. The next section will grapple with what those odds mean for the people who live here, and what happens when probability becomes reality. A magnitude 7. Earthquake on the Hayward Fault isn't just a line on a seismologist's map. It is a chain reaction that sends shockwaves through every corner of Bay Area life. USGS scenario models show that in the first few minutes, hundreds of thousands of people lose power. For most, the lights flicker back on within a week, but in the hardest hit neighborhoods, places closest to the fault or built on unstable ground, some families wait up to a month before electricity returns. Water is even more fragile. Fault-crossing pipelines and brittle, aging mains rupture by the thousands. In the densest East Bay corridors, tap water can vanish for 3 to 7 days, and entire communities may go 2 to 4 weeks before anything close to normal service is restored.